Hey everyone, and welcome. If you're a teacher, you know this feeling. You walk into your classroom and it's filled with students at all these different skill levels. It can feel like you're trying to solve an impossible puzzle, right? Well, what if it's not a problem to be solved at all? What if it's actually a dynamic to be understood? Today, we're going to dive into a toolkit designed to help you turn that very challenge into a strength. I mean, does this sound familiar? I bet it does. This is one of the most common frustrations for teachers everywhere. You want to engage every single student, but it feels like you're constantly being pulled in a million different directions. And you know what? That feeling is completely understandable. So today, let's break down some real, practical ways to handle it. This right here, this slide nails the core dilemma, doesn't it? If you teach to the top of the class, the students who need more support can get completely lost. But if you aim for the middle or the bottom, your faster students might just get bored and totally check out. This is that fundamental tension that we're going to learn how to manage. Okay, so instead of just throwing a bunch of random tips at you, let's get organized. Let's build a framework for our thinking. It turns out most solutions fall into one of two main approaches, two core philosophies. And getting a handle on these two ideas is the key to building a strategy that actually works for your classroom. And here they are. The two big ideas are dividing the class and differentiating the work. Super simple, right? You can either physically separate students into smaller groups, or you can keep the whole class together but give individuals or groups different kinds of tasks. Pretty much every technique we're going to talk about today falls under one of these two umbrellas. All right, let's dive into our first toolkit, smart student grouping. How can we actually divide the class in ways that are truly productive and, not problematic? So, here's the thing. There's an unavoidable trade-off. On one hand, separating students by level is great because they can work at a pace that's comfortable for them. But it can create that better or worse kind of vibe in the classroom. On the other hand, keeping everyone together builds a really strong class identity, and stronger students can help weaker ones. The risk? You might bore your advanced students or lose your struggling ones. There's no single right answer here, just a strategic choice you make for any given situation. So how do you get the best of both worlds? Well, this split and combine workflow is a brilliant model. It's not about permanently separating the class. It's a dynamic flow. You start together, then you split up for different tasks, you come back together for a shared activity, and then maybe you split up again, this time for some peer teaching. It's this constant cycling through different setups that lets you get focused work done while still keeping that whole class identity. And hey, remember, grouping doesn't have to be this big static thing. You can use quick, short-term pairs for just one task. Or you could create more stable, long-term support groups for a whole unit. You could even just split the class in half for 20 minutes to give some really targeted instruction. The key here is just being flexible. Okay, let's pivot to our second toolkit. If grouping just isn't the right fit for an activity, you can always keep the class together, but differentiate the work itself. This is all about what we call dynamic task design. This is such a perfect visual example of what we mean. Both of these worksheets have the exact same core task, write an email to a hotel. But look at the difference. Worksheet A is totally open-ended, perfect for students who are ready for that kind of challenge. But Worksheet B gives them some helpful scaffolding, prompts and phrases to support students who need a little more guidance. It's the same goal, just different paths to get there. And that brings us to this really powerful idea of multi-level tasks. The goal here is to design activities that are open-ended enough that every single student can participate and feel successful, but their final outcomes will naturally look different based on their individual skill levels. So what does this actually look like? Well, in a making sentences activity, one student might make a simple 3-word sentence, while another one creates this complex masterpiece with multiple clauses. And guess what? They're both successful. Poster tasks are also fantastic for this. Everyone can walk around and contribute something at their own pace and level. The magic is that these tasks don't have just one single correct answer. Another brilliant strategy is just to empower students with choice. You could set up a marketplace of different activity stations around the room, or even just hand out a menu of tasks they can choose from. When you do this, you give them autonomy, and they will naturally pick the tasks that are just right for them. It's differentiation that happens all by itself. Okay, so we've gone over some fantastic practical tools. But honestly, the biggest shift isn't in what you do, it's in how you think. So let's talk about how to turn this thing we see as a problem into a powerful potential. So, first things first, we have to ask ourselves, what do we even mean by a student's level? When we call a student intermediate, we're just using shorthand. It's an average, and it completely hides the reality that a student might be a brilliant speaker but really struggle with grammar, or an amazing writer who's just too shy to speak up. This right here, this is the reality. No student is a flat line. Every single learner has what's called a spiky profile. They've got peaks where they excel and valleys where they need a bit more support. The two students here might have the same average score, but their actual skills couldn't be more different. So what do we do with this amazing insight? Well, it means we start assessing skills separately. We help our students see and understand their own spiky profiles. And most importantly, we design different kinds of tasks that let students shine where they're strong, while we support them in the areas where they're weaker. A role-playing activity, for instance, lets that great speaker really excel. Suddenly, the mixed level class is actually the perfect environment for this to happen. And when you really embrace this idea of spiky profiles, you start to realize the goal isn't just to manage or survive the differences in your classroom, which leads us to this final, huge, transformative question. Instead of always trying to solve the mixed level problem, what if you could dissolve it? What if the problem itself is really just a matter of perception? And that's the ultimate mindset shift, to see all of these differences not as a deficit or a headache, but as a source of strength, a resource for peer teaching, for richer discussions, and for a more dynamic and exciting learning environment for everybody. The mixed level classroom isn't a problem to be fixed, it's a reality to be leveraged.